Welcome back, boys and girls. Yes, we are on story 4 today already of volume 3, and it says trouble in the family. There seems to be a lot of trouble in the children of Israelites as they journey from Egypt to Canaan. There's been loads and loads and loads of trouble. So today there's another trouble in the family, and this one we find it in Numbers chapter 12. So it goes. Before we go, let me pray. Good afternoon, dear Jesus. This day is for you. I ask you to bless all I think, say, and do. Amen. There is an old saying that it never rains, but it pours. Certainly, Moses must have thought so when not only were the people grumbling, but his own brother and sister started to complain about him. This must have been very hard for Moses to understand because he loved Aaron and Miriam very much. Miriam was his big sister who had watched over him when he was just a baby floating in a basket among the papyrus plants on the river Nile. Once Aaron had walked all the way from Egypt to Mount Sinai to see him. All three of them had worked and worried and prayed together over the great task of bringing Israel out of Egypt. What could be the matter with them? They were behaving like naughty children instead of the elderly grown-ups that they were. First, they began to tease Moses about his wife because she was a Midianite with dark skin. They said that she was an Ethiopian or a Cushite. There was cruel barb in what they were saying that Moses didn't like. Next, they said, "Has the Lord spoken only through Moses? Hasn't he also spoken through us?" So this was it. They were jealous about something. Moses wondered what it could be. Did they want his job? Were they tired of his being in charge? Then he remembered, of course, like Joshua, they were unhappy about the appointment of the 70 elders and the way God's Spirit had been poured out on them. They were afraid they wouldn't be quite so important in the camp from now on. Moses, they thought, should have asked them before doing anything like this. What a terrible state of affairs. If Aaron and Miriam were beginning to grumble like the others, things had become pretty bad. What could be done about it? There was nothing Moses could do. He had just been obeying God's instructions when he had named the 70 elders. And he certainly hadn't been responsible for pouring out God's Spirit on them. But Moses wasn't the kind of man who would argue for himself. The Bible says that by this time, Moses was a very humble man, more humble than anyone else on the face of earth. Here was a situation where God had to step in, and he would have to settle the matter in a big way to make sure there would be no more misunderstanding. So while the three were talking together rather heatedly, the Lord said to Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, "Come out to the tent of meeting, all three of you." This was an order. They went wondering what was going to happen next. When they arrived at the tabernacle, the pillar of cloud came down very low until all three of them seemed to be shut with God. Then God spoke, "Aaron and Miriam," he said, and the two stepped forward. "Listen to my words. When a prophet of the Lord is among you, I reveal myself to him in visions. I speak to him in dreams. But this is not true of my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. With him I speak face to face, clearly and not in riddles. He sees the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses?" Aaron and Miriam stood silent because it was clear that God was very displeased because of what they had said to their brother. They waited to see whether God would speak again, but he didn't. The cloud rose, and the three found themselves standing together under the brilliant desert sunshine. Suddenly, Miriam let out a scream. "Look at me," she cried. "Look, I have leprosy." Aaron turned toward her and saw that she had leprosy. This was terribly serious, for in those days, Leprosy was considered a very contagious disease. Anyone with leprosy had to be banished from the camp at once. It was a most touching moment. Miriam, all broken up, was weeping her heart out at her awful punishment. Aaron, sick with worry and very sorry for his part of the trouble, was pleading for forgiveness for himself and his sister. And Moses, the one Miriam had hurt most of all by her bitter complaints, was on his knees begging God to heal her. Perhaps never in all history was there such a pathetic family scene, and God was watching it all. His heart of love was deeply moved. He heard Moses' prayer. Miriam was healed, but he said that she should be put out of the camp for 7 days like anyone else who had leprosy. Then she could come back and everything would be all right again. So poor Miriam was led to the edge of the camp and put outside. Moses and Aaron went along to comfort her and tell her goodbye. And I'm sure they were at the same spot a week later to welcome her back with open arms. Oh, that's a beautiful story. I'd forgotten about this story. It really is beautiful. Thank you, boys and girls, for joining.